when the supply chain took a dive, everybody opened the cupboards to see what they could find, and we were in the cupboard.
Was that at the same time they were buying when they were buying all the bog roll and the pasta?
Yeah, baked
Remember
beans,
that?
anything tinned.
At the start of the pandemic, you couldn't get. I went to Sainsbury's and there was like not a leaf of bog roll.
I had a newborn during COVID.
Oh shit!
And you couldn't even buy baby powder milk because people were buying baby powder milk to make cups of tea with. Cheers.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Right. They couldn't just buy normal powdered milk. Or perhaps you can't get that. Perhaps all you can get is like formula.
The things that people are buying is odd though, isn't it?
Well, maybe they thought, while I'm at it, I might as well get all the nutrients. Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. We got Ian sniggering in the corner because our special guest, who I'll introduce, I won't bury the lead, Darren Pearce, CEO of TXO. Welcome, Darren.
Afternoon.
You were kind enough to bring us some beers, which are called slightly confusingly Butty Batch. I mean...
No comment.
Yeah, indeed. And I opened up Ian's and it won't stop...
It's a science experiment.
It won't stop sort of foaming up. And Ian's getting intimidated by it. It's like some kind of 1950s science fiction film, isn't it? The foam. So that's what's going on there. So welcome, Darren, and thanks a lot for bringing beers.
Welcome.
Saved you having to do a forfeit like we had to get Howard to do a couple of weeks ago. No, the sheath isn't working on that. Oh, look, mine's going for it as well. It's a slow burner, this beer.
It's fermenting still.
But Darren's is all right.
Yeah. Yours are.
He's given us booby-trapped ones.
He has. And we're recording this early. We're not sure when it's going to go up because basically tomorrow I'm flying off to Canaries because it's my brother's 50th and he lives in the Canary Islands. So for the next few days, we're going to be sort of not acting our age. Bunch of, like, he's 50, I'm 52. Bunch of middle-aged men just on the lash.
Just about middle-aged.
I know.
Tops on, tops off.
What? If I ever had a tops on period of my life, it's long behind me. No, for the good of my own dignity and the rest of humanity, my top will stay on. What do you think the window for middle age is? Because obviously when you're younger, how old are you, Paul? We got Paul from Babel in the background. Shout out to you, Paul.
I'm 36.
36. So would you say 40 is the start of middle age?
Yeah, must be.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly... It's hard to push back on it once you're the wrong side of 40, isn't it?
What's the end of middle age, though?
Well, that's what you were just alluding to. 60?
No, 65.
65.
Oh,
retirement, maybe.
That's very nice of Pierre to throw 65 in.
So I've got a solid 13 years left before I'm proper old. Well, I actually got to give a shout out, not that he listens to it, to my son, who's 20 today.
Oh.
So, and I was saying to him, while you're legally an adult 18, I think once you're 20, there's no fucking around.
Yeah, happy birthday,
you're definitely
Jack.
a grown up now.
But he's not a teenager anymore, yeah.
He's not a teenager. He's, at the end of this decade, he'll be expected to have a mortgage and 2 kids and a black Labrador. So
Rafa was 50, not 50. Bloody hell, that would be weird. 20 last year. So
right. Oh, he's a bit older than Jack then. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So there we are. And it's time to stop mucking around and get serious.
Show it.
Oh, right.
Darren
has started.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird? That's
It's
a
activated.
slow burner.
It's still fermenting,
Yeah.
By the time you're done, it'll be 10%.
Yeah. It's the beer's way of saying, get on and fucking drink it. It's like going, it's being needy. It's needy beer. It's going, don't forget about me.
Yeah.
Apparently, according to the little label on the neck of the beer bottle, it's masterfully Moorish.
Oh, there you go.
It is very nice,
We
actually.
have
Good
got
call.
more. We've got more.
Yeah, we got more. It's from Wye Valley, which is like on the Wales-England border, is it? Is it that sort of?
Wye River, just not far from our headquarters. So
good.
Hope the water doesn't come from that.
Or Lake Windermere, as I just heard, because they've been pumping shite into it, which is not ideal. Okay. Before we finish the Talking Bollocks section, yesterday, Ian, you had an especially busy day. Mm-hmm. You sort of tag team between me and Pierre, didn't you?
Yeah.
So we got to give BT a double shout out. We were taken to lunch by our friend Alex, who we mentioned on the pod a couple of weeks ago, because I was moaning about my roaming experience in Venice. and I'm an EE subscriber, which obviously causes complications to their PR people. Because then, whenever I bitch about my own experience with VE, it becomes a reputation thing to address. And I went to Venice, and they roamed principally to Vodafone Italia, which was rubbish. It was on like Edge. It wasn't even on 3G. Anyway, and this came up, and I gave them a shout out for addressing it, because apparently it's supposed to roam to Telecom Italia, but for some reason it didn't.
Is that better?
Yeah, that was 5G. There was a weird spectrum. It roamed to all of them. It was a really varied experience. And when it roamed to Tim, it was 5G. When it roamed to, I think, Iliad, it was 4G. When it was Windtray, it was HSPA Plus. And when it was Vodafone Italia, it was Edge.
I bet 5G coverage isn't very good in Italy.
Well, it certainly is in Venice, mate. I can confirm that. Although, we can't moan too much about them not slapping tons of radio masts all over historically.
Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons I think
Profound.
it's probably not that
Yeah,
good.
exactly.
Floating masts, maybe?
There we are. Gondola.
Gondola masts.
Gondola base stations.
It's a crappy
I
market.
can see why you're
as well.
a CEO.
It's a crappy market because they fucked it up a bit with the Spectrum auction by having two concessions that were much bigger than the other two concessions in terms of how much.
And they
spectrum
all
got.
overspent on that last.
They
Spectrum
overspent
auction.
massively on the Spectrum, and two of the concessions, which is one of the reasons they overspent, is because everybody was trying to get the bigger concessions. So it caused a distortion. But then you've got companies with only like 20 megahertz of mid-band spectrum,
Right.
which I think if you deploy it, then you're getting
Basically, you get more
not what you'd-
than a couple of tourists on it, and it all crashes.
Yeah, I mean, there's less you can do with it, obviously, than on a fatter
Well, yeah.
channel. So
But obviously, it goes without saying that you shouldn't be obsessed with being connected when you're in Venice, other than to send smug photos onto social media, of course. So we went out. I'd forgotten their names. Sorry, lads, and I got Alex to remind me. We went out with Alex, Liam, and Daniel from BT. Took us to a really nice sort of Eastern Mediterranean themed, like posh Eastern Mediterranean in Borough Market called Oma, I think it was. And that was really nice. And we got off to a good start. We had a couple of cocktails to start.
yeah,
Got you a Negroni order before you'd even turned up.
you did.
You know him well.
Yeah. and yeah, it's quite funny that we ordered a bunch of food, and they sort of encourage you to go for a sort of tapas sort of approach. They don't have a meze, which I think Eastern Mediterranean restaurants should have, which people who don't know is like Greek and Turkish food. You just order the meze, and it's just like tons and tons of plates of various bits and bobs, and you just eat until you beg them to stop.
Yeah,
And then the waiter came up and he went, has someone taught you through the menu? And it was like on one sheet of paper. So I was like, what, you mean other than to say, pick what you want, tell us, and then we'll bring it to you? And he was like, huh. And then he proceeded to say, I recommend you get 2 of these, 3 of these, 4 of them. And he basically just ordered tons of shit.
he ordered the food for us, didn't he?
More or less.
Yeah.
But I don't think he needed to be that sort of thorough
Yeah.
in his explanation on how to order loads of shit off that one bit of paper.
Do you know what I'd say? There wasn't as much food as I thought there'd be.
No, after all the ordering, we weren't totally stuffed.
The
were we?
portions were quite small,
Yeah.
and
You're not
for 5
selling
of
it
us.
to me.
It was really good quality.
Okay.
It was really, really tasty. But it was.
Yeah.
But as it happened, because I was going out later, I wasn't that bothered about not eating too much
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah.
So
Well, onto that. But thanks a lot, lads, and don't worry, Alex. We're not going to talk about what we spoke about at lunch, because I know he's thinking, "Fucking hell, Scott, you're going to get me in the shit." And then BT also invited you, not me, but don't worry, I'm not butthurt. It was a contact that you have at BT that I'm not familiar with, but maybe that will change. Invited to go to the Spurs game
yeah,
at Spurs Stadium where they're playing Man City. And they said you can bring a colleague. And when you sent a message to me and Pierre about it, Pierre bit your hand off. And actually, I can't begrudge him it because Pierre's an Arsenal fan, and that game was actually much more significant for Arsenal than it was for Spurs. In so much as if Spurs had managed to even draw with Man City, then
It's a good
all you
chance to
needed to do was win and maintain the goal difference, and then you would have won the title. Now it looks very unlikely unless Man City trips up against West Ham, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, so bad luck, Pierre.
Well, there
But
might
your
be
hopes can't have been high.
There might be a moment on Sunday if we score first, where for that period of time we're actually champion.
Yeah. I know, it'll be painful.
Yeah.
You
That was
know.
great though. Great. It was a pretty good football game. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was going to ask, so both of you have been to the box at Stamford Bridge, Chelsea, yeah? I've never been. I've been to Spurs Stadium. Well, sadly, for us as a Spurs fan, pathetically, I've never been there for a Spurs game, so I'm obviously not a very good fan. The only time I've been there is for a Guns N' Roses concert.
Right.
And actually, the acoustics were shite. That's something you need to work on, Spurs. Yeah. They really were.
Everyone says it's great. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it was...
Guns N' Roses.
Maybe just for that group, for that night.
Oh, yeah, I don't know what it was. Just like the range was not good. Bass wasn't coming through, that sort of thing. Well, let's hear your reviews, Pierre. How does it compare Spurs Stadium versus Stamford Bridge?
I don't know. The Stamford Bridge is like it's a room, and then you're standing, and then they bring food to you.
Yeah.
Like on a plate, and
then you can go outside to sit on the terrace area.
Yeah, Spurs was more like a restaurant vibe, and you sit down at the table, and then you just go outside. It felt bigger though.
It's just as easy to get outside as it is in the room, because you're in the restaurant, but there's a kind of glass sliding door that you open to, and then the seats are there, and you obviously put your table sort of corresponds to an area where you're going to be sitting.
Are you sectioned off from the Hoyper?
You're not. That's the big difference, isn't it? If you imagine,
I don't want to go.
I mean, if you imagine like you've been to the Chelsea,
to
a Chelsea match. So if you imagine if you took out those partitions in the boxes and just had one long thing, but done a bit nicer than that,
Ian,
look more like a restaurant.
What was the best thing of the whole thing?
There's a lot of free food. Oh, yeah, I told them about that. They have heated seats.
Wow.
That was a game changer.
At Spurs.
Didn't change the game.
It didn't change the game.
So while you're not
comfortable seats, by the way.
While you're not sectioned off, I presume everyone doesn't get that. So while you're not sectioned off from everyone else, you've got better seats than everyone else.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole point of going to a box is so you can feel superior to everyone else, isn't it?
Yeah,
other than getting pissed.
I didn't actually sit down.
Maybe
for
even
the first
watching the game.
So
you didn't sit down.
I just stood at the back
until your bum got cold.
Well, I'd gone to the loo, and then everybody was sat down, and I didn't want to kind of force my way through.
Yeah,
and I also felt like standing anyway because I've been sitting down for like 3 hours just eating.
No, the seat warmer, that was...
Life's a bitch, eh?
But then when I did sit down, I thought I should have sat down. Because
the seat warmer was a game changer.
The best
then you're
seat.
just like so comfortable.
Right.
Because you got like...
you could fall asleep comfortably. It's like... It's almost like it's like being in a jacuzzi.
Well, I'm sure you can fall asleep comfortably at a lot of Spurs games. To be honest. Ooh, hello. I can say that because they're my team.
I mean, you said...
No, actually, they're quite exciting. They're just not that good.
They were not exciting last night.
No,
they weren't.
No. Except for right at the end where it looked like they were going to equalise.
Yeah,
sure. I was a bit disappointed by Haaland as well. I mean, I know he scored 2 goals, but that must have been the only time that he had anything to do with the... I suppose that's what you do as that kind of player.
He's your classic centre forward, isn't he? Classic target man and finisher.
He's not though, is he? He's not supposed to be a classic target man. I thought he was supposed to be...
I think so. He's fucking huge.
I know he is, but I thought it was supposed to be a bit more to him than that.
Yeah, well, whatever. I'm certainly not going to get into football commentary cliches. I get enough of that with my mates on my chat group I have with them. So there's almost no limit to how deep you can go in sort of theorising and opining about football, I've learnt. But anyway, are you much a football man, Darren?
Ipswich.
Ipswich.
They're my boys.
And you were just reminding me that it had just been promoted to the Premier League. First time in about 20 years or something?
Double bounce.
Double bounce?
As in first championship.
Oh, wow.
Well, they were 2
rare.
leagues below last year. Wow, that's amazing.
And automatic.
Is that the first time someone's done that?
Leicester.
Right.
Leicester.
Right. And so was it a lot of the same squad that came up from... So what do they call that the Championship, and then they call the one below like League One?
League One, yeah.
Is it much the same squad as the one in League One?
That's the thing, they haven't spent much.
That's an incredible overperformance by that group of players, isn't it?
Yeah, that's pretty
good.
good.
Let's see what happens, but let's hope it's
Back
not
to
double bounce down.
Back to that legendary late 70s cup winning team.
Yeah, when I was a boy.
What was it all? Paul Mariner, Eric Gates,
Terry Butcher,
John
Ward.
I only know this because I've got.
I don't say he knows any of them. I mean,
well, I know it partly because I got family. All my mum's side of the family come from Bury St Edmunds in Suffolk, and so they're all tractor boys. That's what you call Ipswich fans. Tractor boys.
Yeah,
because it's all a bit agricultural over there.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Given that this is quite short, so we're recording this on a Wednesday because I'm off to the Canaries tomorrow, as I said. Whether or not we get round to publishing it before I emerge from that drunken haze remains to be seen. So apologies if this comes to you rather late, but there we are. You're not fucking paying for it, so calm down. Right. Okay. Should we just crack on? We got nothing else to talk about that we've been up to this week, have we? It's only Wednesday, isn't it?
Wednesday. I don't
Yeah.
done anything.
You didn't do anything on Monday.
I went out to a pub quiz.
Did you win?
No, there's 25 teams and we came 4th, which I thought was respectable.
It's not bad. Pub quiz on a Monday. You savage.
They're always on a Monday, pub quizzes.
Yeah, it's because that's the time they're trying to get you in, isn't it?
in.
Right,
Yeah.
and you fell for it.
I've fallen for it
Are
quite
you
a
good
lot.
at Are you good at trivia?
Yeah, pretty
I'm
good.
actually really rubbish at it. I mean, I
Because
feel
you never
like
read
I've got good general knowledge, but I don't have good general knowledge for any of the things that come up in quizzes. So perhaps I don't have good general knowledge. All right, cool. That's enough bollocks. So Darren, TXO. Why don't we just take it from the top for people who aren't familiar with the company? Welcome, and thanks for the beers. And yeah, just tell us, like, top line elevator pitch. What's TXO all about?
Ooh, what do we do?
Yeah.
How would I put it? What's the easiest way to get it across? I suppose we're sort of a catalyst to the circular economy within the telco world.
So circular economy, we mean, is that like modern parlance for second-hand stuff?
Yeah, look, it's all these networks around the world, your media pieces, etc. They're often about the front end, the new stuff, the new tech, the new challenges, etc. But these things have been around for 30, 40, 50 years. You're talking about BT. If you look into their infrastructure, it's like an onion. You peel it back, you peel it back, you peel it back. There's stuff
In the
in
middle
there.
of it, there's some woman putting things in holes.
Something with a Marconi label on it.
Absolutely. There's 30, 40 years worth of technology in there. And it's in the trunk, it's in the core. Yeah, some of that stuff has to keep running. And yeah, everybody's in different phases of switching it off and investment in new stuff. So it's a bit like when you buy a new car. It's under warranty for the first 2 or 3 years from your manufacturer. Thereafter, you start to go elsewhere, but you don't necessarily throw it in the bin after a few years.
Yeah.
I think the reality is a lot of this tech is being sweated a lot longer these days. So they have to come somewhere for spares, maintenance, expansion, etc.
Okay, so it's more than just like being part of the circular economy in terms of the gear. You're involved in the actual maintenance and that side of things.
Repair, refurbishment, testing. Got field engineers going out. We're covering this stuff, migration, traffic, power.
Well, it sounds like you're a really important part of it. But as you say, it doesn't get covered by people like us that much.
No, I suppose we're a bit in the shadows.
As I'm sure Paul will lament. It's hard, sometimes hard for us to see a story in it.
It's all right. We'll come out of the shadows every now and again. We are. I suppose we are quite important, actually, but we just don't realise it. We keep things going when actually, if we weren't around, they would just stop.
Yeah.
So.
Are you? I mean, how many people are in that market that are doing what you do? Is it quite a small number of players that are in this business of?
It's growing.
Selling this
It's a growing market, definitely.
Because you're the only ones that I'm aware of.
Yeah. Look, this probably, I suppose, the States is where it originated from.
Right.
Quite dedicated technology in the States. Some old networks. I suppose thereafter Europe is mostly first world sort of economies where the markets are big. I'd like to think we're one of the biggest players. I suppose we sit between the OEMs and some of the system integrators in that sense. But there's a lot of us. Yeah, there's if you're in MWC, there's probably 100 of us walking around.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Do the big OEMs like Ericsson and Nokia, would they resell equipment? Would they have I mean, they're obviously not going to sell. Ericsson's not going to be selling Nokia equipment, but would it take back some of the equipment it might have installed for an operator and sell
Tart
that
it up
on?
a bit and then
Tart
work
it
it out
up
again.
and then sell it on. Does that happen at all?
It's a bit of love and hate when it comes to the OEMs in terms of how we all get along, but we need them, they need us.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they can't keep manufacturing lines going forever, but they've got support contracts with customers where they need to spares,
So I guess
etc.
the potential friction you're alluding to must come where your primary interests overlap. I guess, in terms of, like, for example, maintenance stuff where they'd still like to have the maintenance contract and it might go to you or something like that.
Let's be clear, how does an OEM make money? They manufacture a product or software or license, and recirculating product doesn't create manufacturing revenues.
Yeah.
So there's a place for OEMs. It's new kit, it's the new shiny bits, it's the front end. And the reality is the customer base just has such complex networks, of which, as you say, there's OEMs out there that don't even exist anymore.
Yeah.
So if you've got a Marconi part running in your network, where do you go?
Yeah.
Because it's not Marconi anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's
So you got some warehouse with like 20-year-old gear sitting in it.
I've got, I don't know, can't think. It's 9-10 warehouses around the world now.
Right.
So
Constantly
part of your
flying
job is actually just to sort of help maintain and figure out problems that are going on with something that Nortel might have sold, and there's nobody really to sort of go to and say, Hey, how does this bit of Nortel kit work apart from you?
There's two big sides to the business. It's customers that are retiring an asset, want to turn it into money.
Yeah.
Sometimes that asset is in a warehouse ready to be collected. Sometimes it's what I'd call a trapped asset. So it's actually in the ground or in a building, etc., and it needs to be recovered. So we have our own engineers that physically go and take it out. And then you've got the other, you've got the clever bit in the middle, which is where you're deciding a lot of data, some sort of in-house software, etc., in terms of what's it worth, is there a demand for it, can it be recycled, should it be sold? And then you've got the other side of the coin, which is the customer base that needs that product, whether it's for maintenance, spares, expansion, etc. So it's a bit like a dating agency. You're finding a source and you're connecting it with a need.
Right.
Is this an approved PR metaphor, Paul? The dating agency?
What's the sort of, because I think when I spoke to you a couple of years ago, and I think there might be a bit of a perception that it's first world operators kind of taking out old kit and then maybe selling it to somebody in Africa who wants it on the cheap. But I think you were saying it's not like that at all.
No,
really.
it's very, if I was to hazard a guess, it's probably 70-80% of our kit comes out of first world and goes back into first world.
Right.
It's, I think I was saying beforehand, it's a bit linked to how old the networks are and when the infrastructure was created. So if you think a lot of parts of the world just bypass fixed line, or it's just not quality fixed line.
Yeah.
So it moves straight to microwave and 2G, 3G, etc. But yeah, some of the more developed parts of the world have infrastructure that is just so embedded in everything we do. I made the analogy of the London Underground. You can build capacity into it by putting things like the Elizabeth line in, which is an intricate, expensive thing, but you've got to keep everything else running at the same time. You can't just stop it, rip it all out and start again every 5 minutes. And it's the same with a telco environment. Generally, the big PTTs of the world, your BTs, your Deutsche Telecoms, France Telecom, Orange, etc., they're the ones that have got the huge back catalogue of infrastructure that is very complex.
Yeah.
Well, we were at an event, a BT event, a couple of years ago, where they were very much talking about cost savings and how many exchanges they're trying to shut down over the next few years. It's all going, because it's going to fibre, they don't want 5,000 exchanges anymore, they want 1,000. But that sounds like all of that's going to go into...
Absolutely.
It's going to go into you, I guess.
That's part of our bread and butter. It is. We've been working on that project for 4 or 5 years now, where we have our own engineers going to literally any village, town, city around this country, extracting old switching, old voice legacy switching networks. Yeah. Some of it, a lot of it's resold because there's a lot of precious metal content in it, gold, platinum, silver. And then there's some of it that gets resold into other customers.
So do you get involved in that, kind of taking the raw materials as well and sort of breaking those down and maybe not selling it as the box it was, but selling the bits from the box?
Huge volumes. Right. So everything comes in. We make that decision. Do we want to keep it for stock or do we recycle it? And then it's all exported because unfortunately there's no precious metal smelters here in the UK, but it's exported around the world for precious metal extraction. So huge volumes of copper, silver, gold, platinum. And for us, a lot of it moves to Japan, who want it for their own manufacturing needs rather than
that's interesting.
Remining ore out of the ground.
Okay.
One of the big pieces we're now involved in is the actual copper cable extraction. So we all recognise a switch room full of fancy kit with lights flashing, a lot of power, etc. But how's it connected? Well, traditionally it's all connected with copper cable, and there's copper cable under the streets of every city, the thickness of your thigh. And what's the value of copper doing? It's continuing to go up, demand's going up. All of this traffic is being switched off the copper. And now there's an extraction focus around the world of actually the physical removal of that product. Yeah. So we've just acquired a business in Germany called Techport that does that and nothing else. It
strips out the copper.
It literally extracts the copper network out of some of the German operators.
So that's almost worth more than it was when it went in.
Absolutely.
Some of it.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there's thousands upon thousands of miles of it.
Are you looking at the price of copper?
I am.
There's still them of like plumbers' vans. If it's on
it's gone up. You can see.
Yeah, well, it's quite volatile.
Yeah.
I guess a lot of commodities are, for reasons that unless you're like elbows deep in that market, you can't possibly understand. It's shot up a little bit in the last few months, but then it's only up to about a similar peak to where it was in 2022.
So what's driving that up? What would it get used for particularly? Is that stuff that would go to Japan where they're using it in?
What would it get used for? If you think of everything that's going through an electrification, so be it cars,
Right.
be it rail, be it any infrastructure that is moving to a electrical source rather than a fossil fuel source,
That explains it.
you need copper.
Yeah.
Do you want to hear what Trading Economics, the website I just got the price from, has to say? It's got a little bit of commentary.
It's going to say exactly what Darren's just said.
Well, it's not going to contradict him, although it might. I've only read the first sentence or so. I think you're all right, Darren.
Of course.
Copper futures soared to a record high of $5.13 per pound before easing, blah, 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 as increasing concerns of insufficient supply to speculative demand, so that's sort of fairly generic, isn't it, were magnified by a short squeeze in the US. Copper's key role in electrification, there we are, 10 out of 10.
Okay.
From electrical vehicle charging to grid-scale energy storage and data center infrastructure underpinned forecasts for the metal's utility. Meanwhile, China imported more copper ore inputs. I mean, China's always stockpiling this shit, isn't it?
But can you sell to China? Does geopolitics interfere with what you're doing at the moment now that everybody's decided they don't want
Yeah, if the
China
Yanks told you you're not allowed.
Not yet. We're not into copper sort of ore trading. You see, the other big part is the cost of actually extraction from sort of resources, as in what's more cost effective, digging it out of the ground,
recycling or
bringing
from
it.
ore. Yeah.
Do they try and take it out sometimes when they're putting in fibre? Does that generally not happen because you
You'd
need
think
to have
that
an
would be the
overlap?
sensible route, but often not.
Like while you're there.
While you're there,
Yeah.
But yeah, the scale of this stuff is huge. You've got the telco operators that have got it everywhere.
Yeah.
And then you move to things like the railway infrastructure. Railway, all of their signalling, and still a lot of it, would run on copper alongside the track.
Yeah.
And now it's moving to GSMR and now fibre, etc. So we've just completed a pilot with part of Deutsche Bahn in Germany where you're actually extracting the copper that used to do the signalling. It's the scale is vast.
Mm.
Do the operators that are taking it out, would they have like a use for it in another area? Like you said, like data center infrastructure. I know they're not in that business in a big way, but
I'd go back to the concept that it's trapped money.
Yeah.
If you think of the value of that copper, when you actually do the calcs of, I don't know, pick a BT, and if you times it by how much copper is under the ground, and you were able to monetize it because it's trapped, it's just
buried.
It's
money.
buried. Yeah, it's literally buried
Quite
money.
literally.
yeah.
It's part of the using that asset, turning it into a financial asset, and then redeploying it.
Yeah. What sort of impact? Because this circular economy expression is quite popular at the moment for sort of environmental reasons and avoiding waste.
Well,
But
the little logo for being nice and green and responsible was always little arrows in a circle, wasn't it?
But with that becoming like a much bigger deal over the last few years, has that had a big impact on the desire among companies to do this stuff? Are they trying to be a bit more conscious about not just taking it out and maybe dumping it like they would have done in the past?
Look, I suppose I've been doing this for quite a few years now, and it's not a hard sell.
Yeah.
There's a lot of customers that actually just proactively want to come after it now rather than us trying to force feed it. But it's at different places around the world in terms of its adoption. If you go to, let's pick one, Sweden, we've got a facility in a place called Eskilstuna, just outside Stockholm. And they took me into the shopping mall, and the shopping mall had nothing in it other than second-hand goods. No new products sold.
Right.
They just it's just in their culture.
Yeah.
To be tight asses.
To be circular. Yeah. To bring I'll steer away from that. To be
My words, Darren, not
circular.
yours. It's fine.
Some are less focused. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we often use the expression semicircular. So be
What's that
careful.
mean?
Yeah, that sounds like something slightly dodgy, doesn't it? But
Almost anything could, if you allow it.
that's where this is the view where we have certain customers that will just take from the economy, the circular economy, and some just want to give.
Right.
And you sort of make that sort of.
I suppose if you can match one with the other, it's not so bad. But
Yeah, your ideal customer is somebody who's prepared to put all of their redundant assets, resources into the economy, but equally are prepared to source from it.
Yeah. But isn't in there, the only, we were talking a little bit before we started about the circular economy and, how it's certainly trendy for companies to try and tick the green box and make it seem like they're sort of placating Greta Thunberg the whole time. Although she's gone on to Palestine now, she can't be fucked with the planet anymore.
Did she get arrested?
She got arrested wearing one of those kafirs.
Yeah. But I think that's like her main mission, isn't it, to get arrested as much as possible?
I think to get attention, yeah. But and then often I think it's quite sort of token and superficial from things like carbon credits, which you may be able to inform me on, but they seem like a bit of a medieval indulgence, just a sort of way of sort of commoditizing green virtue. Like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to fly around the world, I'm going to have a coal-fired power station, and I'm going to do whatever incredibly eco-unfriendly stuff is, but I got all these carbon credits, so I'm good to go. It sort of offsets it. And someone somewhere else has promised that they're going to plant a tree every time I do something naughty, so we're good.
Renewable energy certificates, I think, is the new
but
thing.
there was carbon credits as well, wasn't there?
I think some of it works well in some cases and it doesn't work well in others. Like if you have a proper power purchase agreement, isn't it, the PPA stuff, where you've actually contracted somebody to provide your energy,
right?
Then it's on a renewable basis. That's more legit than some of these renewable energy certificates where it's like that. And the medieval indulgence is a really good example because you get that, but you're still buying it from the grid and it might not really mean anything other than what paper.
I think there's a lot, as with so many things, there's obviously totally justified concern about killing the planet because we all kind of need the planet because we live here. But then, you get so much hyperbolic stuff. Like, I think if you look at it, if you like people like my brother, I'm going to go and see later on this week, he's very skeptical about all this environmental stuff. And he's one of these people that gets so into it that he'll sometimes spam you with like, see, I'm right sort of stuff. We've all got friends like that, haven't we? But, a lot of time it is right. And he'll point to people who've said, like, 30 years ago, we got 10 years to save the planet. 20 years ago, we got 10 years to save the planet. And so you get this catastrophizing. And I think that's where, I understand why they do it. From a messaging point of view, they're trying to raise a sense of urgency. But you end up being the boy who cried wolf for that shit.
How high is La Gomera above sea level? Because he might quickly find out faster than most people whether he's right or wrong.
Or what suntan SFP?
Both of those are considerations. Well, the Canaries are a volcanic archipelago, so they're quite steep.
So
all you got to do is just go about
obviously
10 yards
coastal areas. It's going to get a lot smaller. Some of those islands, aren't they?
Well, do you know what? I don't. Again, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too much, but I don't know how much hard data there is that says sea levels are rising.
No, I don't.
I mean, I don't know how many, coastal areas or really low areas like Suffolk or Holland or whatever.
There's bits that have disappeared. Yeah.
Right, there are bits. Yeah, there are bits. And every now and then you get a photo either of like half a house falling off a cliff, which does beg some questions about what they were doing with that house, or of a polar bear standing on a really tiny iceberg. So there's like
that's
the visual
different as well.
representation.
I think you're right. There's not.
Anyway,
but sea levels rising isn't something that's happened yet. It's something that we.
Well, so there we are. So that's where a lot of this catastrophizing comes from. But that's not really, that's not really
raining a lot though, hasn't it? Is that something to do with it?
Yeah, and it was a bit hot earlier on this week. What more fucking proof do you need? But bringing that tangent back to what you do, do you find that that's an increasing part of the sort of narrative of the I suppose USP or whatever, where you're involved in, is helping people participate in and be nice and green.
I'll be sensible. I'm not here to judge, but there is a much increased adoption to what we do. As I say, more people are coming to us. Market's growing. Is it driven? There's probably two things happening here. There is be it shareholder, consumer, whatever it is, expecting these things to happen. But equally, everybody's under pressure from a monetary perspective, and we do make it cheaper or make money for people.
Yeah,
Simple.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's always my view about all this eco stuff, is where it requires some real asceticism, or even worse, where developed countries are then putting pressure on developing countries to develop less quickly in order to save the planet. Meanwhile, we've had our fun and we've had our industrial revolution and we're all good to go.
Yeah.
But all that stuff I'm not into. Let me just quickly finish. Whereas technological solutions, whether they're clever bits of green technology or whether they are business processes that are more efficient. I'm with you all the way.
Yeah, and if the two dovetail, then it doesn't matter. But I remember you were saying, I think, another driver, like when I interviewed you a couple of years ago, which is during sort of COVID or at the tail end, that had given quite a lift because there was a lot of supply chain issues then, and people were, I think, coming to you, weren't they, to get parts that they just couldn't get anywhere else.
Yeah, certainly. Look, when the supply chain took a dive, everybody opened the cupboards to see what they could find, and we were in the cupboard.
Was that at the same time they were buying all the bog roll and the pasta?
Yeah, baked
remember
beans,
that?
anything tinned.
At the start of the pandemic, you couldn't get. I went to Sainsbury's and there was like not a leaf of bog roll.
I had a newborn during COVID.
Oh shit!
And you couldn't even buy baby powder milk because people were buying baby powder milk to make cups of tea with. Cheers.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Right. They couldn't just buy normal powdered milk. Or perhaps you can't get that. Perhaps all you can get is like formula.
The things that people are buying is odd though, isn't it?
Or maybe they thought, while I'm at it, I might as well get all the nutrients.
I couldn't understand the race for bog roll.
No, because it was a knock-on effect because Hong Kong was dependent on
bog roll.
And then the Aussies heard that, everyone is hoarding toilet paper in Hong Kong, we should do the same. And then
so it's like a global viral panic.
The Aussies are getting all that, so then everyone was like,
what started the Hong Kong people hoarding bog roll? Was it like you don't want to...
Because I think they're not making their own, so they were relying on China for that.
They import, they're not self-sufficient on bog roll in Hong Kong.
Dangerous.
So one country was not, and then it just all the...
So like the pasta one, when you couldn't get hold of pasta or rice, that was more understandable because that's obviously a food that, long shelf life sort of thing.
Was there a bit of the business in particular that like really kind of benefited from that?
Product stock on shelf. It's like a supermarket. It just flew off.
Right.
But
did you think of hoiking it up a bit?
Never.
Yeah, well, it was a tenner last week, but
you should come work for me. Good commission. No, you've got your regulars, as in your regular customers that knew where to come straight away. Yeah, good prices. And then you've got the word of mouth, as in those that haven't used you so much, who suddenly appeared.
Right,
high prices. But genuinely, those who came didn't really leave. As in, they come, think, hang on, it's cheaper, it's quicker, it serves a purpose, and continue to trade with us.
So that's been good, sort of sustainable business for you.
Absolutely. And do you know what the other thing we see in the market is there's not many OEMs these days. You can count them on your hands, and probably less over time. You can
count them on a severely disfigured hand.
And we see that the big operators, like your tier ones, etc., they get a lot of love and attention, and they get what they want when they want it. But you've got these tier twos, tier threes operators that are, frankly, in the queue, waiting, or not even in the queue. Yeah. So they want product, they have to look for it, and they actually come to our market to source a lot of their kit.
Okay. Because there's an Open RAN angle, Ian?
Well, the only Open RAN angle I was going to draw on there is that it's interesting, Darren, saying there's not a lot of suppliers, is there? Because it's what we were talking about yesterday, that so far it's really sort of failed to produce.
And presumably, I think you've already said you'll have strong relationships with like SIs and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
One thing, it's just a recurring thing on this pod. We talk about Open RAN quite a lot, partly because Ian, although he pushes back on being accused of being a sort of Open RAN like
nutter.
What was it? A hawk. Is it hawk or dove? No, I can't remember what animal it is.
Someone calls me a serial Open RAN critic, where the word critic is used as detractor.
Yeah. Whereas all he really is, and I'll defend Ian on this while still winding him up, like I did at lunch yesterday, going, "What's wrong with you? Why do you hate Open RAN so much?"
I don't.
Exactly. See, it works every time. This is why I do it. Because fuck it, he bites every time. He's just pointing out that a lot of the initial claims and hype made about Open RAN is not being borne out in real life. Anyway, but the only reason I thought of that tangent, other than the fact that Ian's obsessed about it, is that I mean, you're fitting into this ecosystem, and one of the stated aims of Open RAN is just to open up the whole ecosystem to new vendors and all that sort of thing. And I'm wondering whether you'd have an active role to play in that, or I guess you would just follow it wherever it goes.
I could see it potentially creating an opportunity for you, actually, if I'm going to be upbeat about Open RAN.
Do you want a job as well?
Another job interview.
Here we go.
I'll be in sales.
some
I'll be in
commission
sales.
for it.
He'll be in strategy.
But if it does make it easier to swap out bits and not that's one of the pitches, isn't it? That you don't have to take a whole system out and you can replace the bits and components of it. Then that would sound like an opportunity for a company like TXO to come along and play in that space.
Yeah,
definitely.
it becomes commoditized.
Yeah.
It's so one of the themes we're seeing at the minute is you've obviously got a lot of talk and action around 3G being switched off.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a rush to bolster 4G.
Okay.
But where do you go for it?
Yeah, because everybody's just selling 5G. The kit vendors.
So good for us. As
So
a
don't
market.
the likes of Ericsson, Nokia keep a good sort of stash of older gear? I guess not that much, or you wouldn't have a job, would you?
Probably have to ask them.
Yeah. But there must be some kind of market gap
old garage.
that you fill.
An old garage. Look, they do come to us and buy from us as well. So,
Right. What, like their own older gear? All right, we'll just leave that there.
Well, you were talking about the copper coming out, and that might get sort of boiled down into basic raw materials again and sold on. But is it quite different on the mobile side where people might be taking out, like you say, a 3G base station or something, and then it just gets directly sold on to somebody who still wants 3G somewhere?
Yeah, some of the older radio is mostly for recycling, so that's precious metal content. But you get a bit of demand on 3G. Obviously, there's more supply than there is demand coming out.
Yeah.
But 4G, look, we're working with a lot of big global operators around the world, where they're doing their 5G deployment. You get the 4G out as they take it out and replace it, and that 4G already has a home before we've even got the product. It's sold to someone else.
Right.
So, it's just like literally, as I say, it's a bit like dating agency. You know where the source is, and you've got a demand, and it's just constantly joining the dots.
Yeah, and the people like that you mentioned, like sort of BT and the tier ones who are doing a lot of this sort of copper cable removal and shutting down exchanges.
Yeah.
But in terms of them being on the other side of it and coming to you potentially for stuff, you won't be able to talk about specific customers, but is there something that you see tier ones looking for in particular that they're trying to get hold of?
The nature of tier ones, they're complex, they're big, they're global, so they just have this huge back catalogue. So it's just a really complex need.
Yeah.
And we go back to how many OEMs you can count on a bad hand.
Yeah.
They need to keep these networks running. So they are complex networks that require a lot of attention, both from themselves and from people like us. And hats off to BT. They really do put a lot of focus into this these days, particularly these very long-term complex projects in terms of power off migrations and then the physical extraction, and then all the sparing and maintenance that's needed to keep the old stuff running.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't want to be head of procurement for some of that stuff. It must be pretty complex.
Well, I guess the fact that because we're always moaning about how the telecom industry isn't doing that great in terms
I've got a tangent on that in a sec.
Service revenues. It's there's the difficulty of growing your service revenues these days now that everybody's got broadband and everybody's got mobile, and where's the next growth opportunity? So they're incredibly focused on cost, which means taking out things and not running too much energy and all this kind of stuff, which sort of plays to your business, I guess.
The other big thing that you see, huge impact on these operators is when they built a lot of their network 20, 30 years ago in a building around here, for instance, that lease comes up. The landlord doesn't want to renew the lease because it wants to be redeveloped into offices or accommodation, etc. They have to take those out. And then they have to replan and redeploy their networks in different ways. So you've not only got this redundancy, you've also got this forced move where stuff that they built on a 30-year basis, they still need it, but the building's up for renewal and they can't get those leases renewed. So they then have to go through this huge migration program.
To your point you just made, by the way, Paul, I never asked you, do you want a beer?
Go on then.
Yeah.
He's been sitting there quietly for ages waiting for you.
Very rude of me. What
Shake
about
it
you,
up
Pierre? Yeah, I shook it up just to humiliate him off camera.
He has as well.
No, well, this is one of the reasons we go for Hazy Jane, because it's not very fizzy, so you don't get that spurting problem. I know you worry about that, Paul. Couldn't resist. Talking about telcos sort of having a hard time, I noticed an FT piece yesterday written by one...
So you said NFT, what?
an FT piece.
Yasmin.
Yeah, about Yasmin, who we met at Mobile World Congress at the Orange Dinner, and I don't think I've met Costas.
Don't know him.
And the headline is investors place record 300 million bet against BT, so they're shorting it. I had to remind myself, I know what shorting is sort of, but I actually looked it up, and Charles Schwab describes it accordingly. Short selling involves borrowing a security whose price you think is going to fall, which is a weird thing itself. Yeah, can I just borrow that, mate? You know, it's like, can I borrow
Well,
your
you pay a commission on it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the incentive for the person to lend you it. And then you buy the same stock back later, and then you sell it, the borrowed stock, then you go and sell it on, and then you buy it back later, and if it's gone down, then you trouser the difference.
Yeah.
You have to get the Wall Street Bets guys on.
Yeah.
Squeeze.
I mean, it's a fascinating thing. I know shorting's been around forever, and there's the big short and all that sort of thing. And in fact, there's these meme stocks like GameStop is being shorted again, which is a funny thing. I think we spoke about it on the pod then. The funniest thing about that, the reason they were called meme stocks, is because just these geeks, like these Reddit geeks, heard about sort of hedge funds and big like Wall Street types shorting something. So then they went and bought loads of it to drive its price up just to fuck them up. I mean, I think they end up getting rinsed in the end, don't they?
Oh yeah. There's one that closed.
Right.
A hedge fund that closed.
No, but I mean, but these sort of shorting, these sort of stock trolls end up getting rinsed because
some of them got rinsed
because they're under pressure to hold on to it, and then you hold on to it too long, and then you just lose tons of money. But anyway, it was just an interesting thing that the BT chose to write about it, and I also thought it was interesting. Sorry, this is nothing to do with you, but I like to go off on little tangents every now and then.
They're trying to get the retail investors rally for them.
Yeah, I guess so. So there's all the usual suspects like BlackRock have been shorting it. What is it? I thought this was... So London-based Kintbury, you got to carefully pronounce that, said in December that it was short BT, arguing Telecoms Group had no growth and combined a high-price product with poor service, which I think is a little bit harsh.
I think that's very cruel about BT, to be honest with you.
What a bunch of Kintburys.
Yeah.
I don't think...
I mean, the no growth you could say about any telco, to be honest. That's just the market. And the high price, is it high price particularly BT compared? It's not high price compared to what you pay in America.
Exactly. No, we're saying regularly that the ARPUs
prices are pretty low.
ARPUs here are much lower, with ASPs or whatever.
I mean, I think that as a BT and EE customer, I think their customer service is actually fairly decent these days compared to what it used to be.
I can see why you got an invite to football.
Normally we're not always this nice about BT, by the way.
We'll slag anyone off.
We're often quite critical.
Don't you worry about that, son.
I'll leave at that point.
But I do think they've got better. We're not very complimentary about their strategy shift to be new EE and
talking about the FT that
was brought
selling
up
fridges,
the fridges headline. And I think, to be honest with you, I personally think that's been a bit of a fiasco. I don't really notice any difference at all.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, leaving aside, so just to remind our audience and you about, was it a year and a half ago or just over a year? It was before the Mobile Congress, before this one, wasn't it? They announced that they were going to make their app a sort of multi-purpose consumer app where you can buy all kinds of shit, like a sort of
almost like an
Amazon type of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the FT somewhat sadistically ran with a headline along the lines of BT to start selling fridges.
But I think
so they sort of picked the most improbable bit of like.
No, but I think in fairness to the FT, and I think it was Yasmin who wrote that story. She did an interview with Mark Alera, and I think he used that as an example.
Right.
I think he threw out there.
Himself.
So, for instance, you could come to the store and buy a connected fridge or something, or whatever it might be.
And then when he read that, he's like, kicking
but then if you talk to them,
cooler in the fridge.
What they really wanted to emphasise was not the fridge side of it. It was being able to do things like, this ties in with the whole network APIs thing, but buy a slice for a gaming service that's slightly higher quality while you're playing Fortnite for a few hours.
Buy a not shit connection.
But hit the not shit button.
Okay.
Yeah. This is a little joke. A regular guest of ours, an analyst called Dean Bubley, called it out on LinkedIn recently, where we were joking about a lot of the telecoms world is trying to differentiate on 5G by offering these different slices and different sort of levels of service or whatever. And Ian and I have often argued that if they say this one is going to be like fast and robust and all that sort of thing. Then what was it like before? So that's why we call it the not shit button.
which Dean was very amused by.
Which Dean liked as a sort of pithy way of summarising it. But anyway, no. So
can I have a beer?
Yeah. Sorry, mate. Do you want a bottle or a tin? Do you want more Butty Batch?
No, I'll save those because they're quite big, aren't they? I'll just have a can. Yeah.
How you doing? Oh, you're doing well there, Darren. What do you want, Butty Batch or Hazy Jane?
I'll go can.
Okay.
Start to slur.
Oh, these are 5% though. I've got to warn you.
I did say I'm meeting my chairman after this.
Yeah, exactly.
Be careful. Any advice?
So are you...
Pick a couple more in the ice. Let me just quickly finish this. I thought one more little interesting aspect of this story is that they said some traders have suggested that the outsized amount of shares on loan could be related to Patrick Drahi's Altice UK. It's built a stake of almost 25% in BT. Did I know that?
Yeah, you did.
Fucking hell, a quarter of BT. Using a structure that may involve the lending of shares. So in other words, there's a lot of supply suddenly in the market because there's this geezer that's sat on this position. He's obviously not making any money out of it for now. So he's thinking, maybe you could call it the share circular economy. And he's thinking, I'll just lend them out for a bit and keep a bit of cash ticking over. Anyway, sorry, what were you about to say, Ian?
No, I mean, I was just sort of bringing it back from the tangent to TXO because you're obviously UK based and headquartered, but do you have, what are the big markets where you would have operations? Because you were talking about this German business that you've bought recently, and is it very much focused on Europe with the kind of caveat that you've obviously got this arrangement with Japan for selling, but yeah.
Look, I suppose, where's our bigger markets? Europe, not us these days, but Europe. France is a big operation for us, so
right.
Deal with all three big operators there. Germany's latest addition, Techport, that we acquired December, January.
So they already had quite an established business of doing this kind of copper cable removal.
Big stuff. Reputation. Sort of unknown gem sitting out there that we managed to uncover. Australia is one of our latest investments. If you think of it as a market that it's not the sort of country to go deinstalling 3G or 4G networks. It'd be slightly difficult, but a lot of infrastructure in the populous areas and nobody else doing it. So for us, three big operators out there immediately sending us equipment that is very sought after elsewhere in the world. Scandinavia, as I say, we've got a facility out there that services the whole of Scandi because it just works as a hub, works. They just accept it and it's just in their DNA in terms of how to do it. US is a big market for us, and then we've got places like Brazil, etc., that are sort of more fledgling offices. But as I go back to first world economies, first world type operators, that's where a lot of the core business is. And we're now starting to sort of plan ahead for Middle East, Africa, parts of Asia, as those networks that are now coming up to 15, 20, 25 years of age, because I used to build them when I was younger. They're the sort of customers.
I want to ask you about Africa.
They're the sort of customers that are now coming towards this market because they've got a lot of old stuff now that wasn't old so long ago.
Is the Australia stuff's interesting because they've got this project to do. It's quite old now, but this NBN project, which involved taking a lot of assets, I think, off Telstra and Optus at the time, and some consolidation to this one network. But it sounds like that would have involved quite a lot of removal of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. When you merge
it.
These sort of things together, stuff falls out the other side. And you see that in all of these European mergers.
Yeah,
when
Vodafone 3 would be good. When
you force two networks together, it's like the people. There's redundancies, as there is redundancies in hardware as well.
So Vodafone.
Well, they don't always go, no, we won't get rid of anyone, it'll all be good.
So Vodafone and 3 together is, at the moment, I think they've both got about 18,000, 19,000 sites. So you put those together, you've got a footprint of 36, 37,000, whatever. But they don't want that many in operation, they want 26,000.
Yeah.
So the implication
Well, presumably a lot of those sites, they're all using the same tower or whatever anyway, aren't they?
Well, there's going to be some overlap for sure, but they're basically decommissioning roughly 10,000 sites. That's the plan. That's if it goes ahead.
Yeah.
Which is then presumably going to have to be recirculated.
Yeah.
So,
and we've just acquired a business called Links down in Andover. So it's primarily field engineers, as in technical capability, that are actually doing power migration, traffic migration, physical extraction of kit, etc. So for us, that's a sort of key strategy for us in terms of building up that capability, because of projects like you're talking about. There's going to be this ongoing need to make efficiencies and synergies in these networks as they come together.
So you need a workforce of people who really kind of know about lots of different areas. Really, that must be really hard to do. To get like a.
You always hear about the declining talent pool for people who know about shit.
Yeah, look, especially Marconi base stations.
We're even the circular
economy. These granddads going out and
we're even the circular economy for engineers. Because a lot of our engineers that work for us now are ex-BT or ex-Virgin Media or ex-Vodafone.
Yeah, makes sense.
Because they're made surplus to requirement by the big employers.
Yeah.
But that knowledge, that skill, a lot of them built the networks.
Yeah.
And we now employ them to deconstruct them.
Yeah.
There's your PR hook, Paul. We recycle people. So Links is one of your 4 wonderful brands, according to your website.
Is it? Yeah.
The TXO group is made up of 4 wonderful brands: TXO, MMX, Links, and Techport, which fucked up the X's. You were going strong on the X's till you got to Techport, but then Techport spelled it weird. It's TEQPOT. And you mentioned Techport a minute ago. Is that the one you bought in Germany?
Yeah.
And so, just very briefly, I mean, you kind of touched on it, but just to summarise, so TXO is like the core bit, which probably covers most of what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
How do MMX, Links, and Techport exist as standalone brands?
So MMX, we acquired them in 2019, I believe. So that brought to us lab repair level. So circuit board level repairs, all part of the circle.
Yeah.
If it's broken, it doesn't mean you have to throw it in the bin. You can fix it. So we have a lot of engineers up there that do circuit level
soldering
repairs.
and this sort of stuff.
Yeah, white coat type
done that for
environment. And huge SPMS, spare parts management services. So a lot of customer stock.
Think of them as sort of quick fit.
Yeah. A lot of customer stock that we manage that is all their emergency spares, waiting to be deployed if something goes down.
Yeah.
So that's MMX. Links, big engineering capability here in the UK for extraction and deployment of networks, and Techport, the experts in the big cable extractions. So
you kind of touched on it, because I was thinking a big part of what you must have to do is a sort of quality assurance thing, because whenever you get into the circular economy, or to use the less contemporary term, buying second-hand stuff, obviously a big concern is going to be over what kind of shape it's in.
Yeah.
Whether I bought a second-hand Ford Focus a few years ago. Some bits I wonder I got ripped off because they seem a bit shit.
Yeah.
I keep getting these warning lights and stuff that I shouldn't have for a car that's not that old.
Been mugged off.
But then it's relevant to this tangent because I bought it from a certified Ford reseller rather than just some Arthur Daly in the railway arches.
Yeah.
And so you pay some kind of premium to go for like a certified kite mark Ford approved thing, because you assume there's going to be a higher quality. So I presume a really important part of your business is to have that reputation where if this stuff has been refurbished and recycled by TXO, you can be sure that it's up to scratch.
You definitely want a job, don't you?
Yeah, more in sales and marketing. I'll do both.
All of this stuff comes with warranty. We look at RMA rates and they are tiny. This stuff, it's a good term, never raced or rallied. So it comes out of what we call clean environments. It's not had a hard life, and really some of the stuff, the performance on the hardware itself, there's not much that goes wrong with it.
But do you do like an assessment when someone's taking stuff out? Do you go in and look at it and go, well, this is what we'd offer for that because some of it's not in great shape and some of it's,
Yeah, there's a lot of sort of data and software that sits behind it to understand what its value is and what the demand is on it. So it's a bit like commodity trading. If there's a lot of it and not much demand, the price goes down and vice versa.
Well, like if this Vodafone 3 thing went through, there'd be presumably some glut in the market, wouldn't there? Do you ever get people try and sell you dodgy stuff? Like you turn and they go, "Oh, we've got some great kit here," and then you look at it and it's smoking.
Look, so you're making it sound more and more like Only Fools and Horses.
Yeah.
I suppose
This is my only sphere of reference for.
Let's be clear.
Wheeling and dealing.
We're not down the Sunday market and doing this stuff. Our customers,
donkey jacket on.
Our customers are the brands that you love and know in the market. So that's the key. You know where it's come from. And there's not flea market that we're going to every other week looking for this stuff.
They don't hack the odometer.
Yeah, exactly. and then he has to get all like off daily. Going, it's lovely, mate. It's cushy. It's pucker.
Do you know what? Some of the whole export compliance stuff and all this sort of stuff these days is big, and it's easy to forget that there's a huge amount of sanctions and governance that goes into who can buy from you, where you can sell it to, what that kit does, and therefore what restrictions it has on it, etc. So you have to have this huge back office of capability and knowledge to know who your customer is, where it's coming from, what are the conditions of sale on all
and
that
they keep
stuff.
changing those sanctions all the time at the moment, it seems.
Absolutely.
As soon as Yank politicians get the arsehole about something.
As soon as they find out something's been sold that they're not keen on the sound of, they're like, oh, hang on a minute, I need to have a look at that.
We spoke about this, I think, was it last week or the week before? There was, obviously America's trying to prevent Huawei, trying to prevent US and allied country companies from selling stuff to Huawei especially, but China more generally. But then they come up with these exemptions, these little special licenses, because of course they don't want to completely fuck up the cash flow or whatever of their own companies. So they've got this conflict where they want to cut them off, but they also want to be nice to domestic companies. So they make these licenses, and then every now and then one of those licenses will lead to Huawei just coming out with a new bit of kit that's full of American chips, going, this is great. And then you get these politicians, typically late to the game, going, hold on, what the fuck's going on here? And then having a moan. And then they, as Ian and I both use this metaphor, they then shut the stable door after the horse has bolted. So it's quite hilarious.
A bit like North Korea missiles.
Right, yeah. Well, and all that stuff. I just had a couple more things to ask you, and then we need to move it on unless Ian's got anything else he wants to ask you. One is, I don't think you're not involved in the handset side of it, are you?
No,
that's not you.
No,
because that's a whole big area as well.
Yeah,
I
suppose that's what the consumer sees, as in when you buy a new handset, is it new? Is it refurbished? It's I suppose a parallel market to us. It all goes on. There's OEMs, there's refurbishers, etc.
And there doesn't seem
that
to
is
be
a bit more Only Fools and Horses.
That is a bit more info. Well, and there seems to be a gap in the market there, I suppose, for some kind of kite mark. Let's say you're buying second-hand. I mean, I never bother buying second-hand phones because you can get such a decent phone for about £300 or £400.
But you do get
so
second-hand phones through the main brands.
Yeah,
you can go to EE and get a second-hand phone.
Well, exactly. So that'd be equivalent of my Ford Focus through an approved dealer. And Apple's been doing this sort of stuff for ages.
Huge market.
But there doesn't seem to be a really known third-party sort of kite mark.
No, I think the way it works is there's some big TXO equivalents out there that do all the refurbishment and repairs of phones, but it goes straight back through the OEM or the operator.
Right.
Yeah.
So they maintain the brand.
And then the only other thing I wanted to ask you about is, like, you just touched on it earlier. It sounds like, Ian was going, your company must be staffed by people who've got a really rich experience in the telecoms industry. And you were saying back in the day you were like working on telecoms in Africa and that sort of thing.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
First,
how'd you end up doing that?
I'm not sure actually. I was probably the one that stood there and said yes because I was willing to have a go.
Have you always been a sort of like a telecoms engineer type of person?
I'm sort of mechanical engineer, so I used to design towers, some of the big stuff, 300 metre tall things, and then I got the opportunity to go out to some projects and physically oversee building them, and then I got volunteered, I don't know what it is.
Some combination.
To go out, I think my first project was Egypt with Vodafone. So deployment of the first ever 2G network in Egypt. Building microwave links through the Sinai Desert is an experience.
Blimey.
Right. Then I got moved on
you don't want to be there right now, that's for sure.
Safaricom in Kenya.
Yeah.
And then I suppose, West Africa was the big one.
So this is late 90s, early 2000s?
About that. Yeah. And I've lived in Nigeria, Cameroon, Congo, Kenya, Cairo,
all over the place.
South Africa.
That's such an interesting
It's challenging
background
at
to have.
times.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But yeah, I haven't been for a while actually. I did a lot of it. Plenty of stories. Shot at, taken hostage, ill.
Taken hostage?
Yeah.
You know, where was that?
AK-47 shoved in the ribs, and
Blimey. Wait, what country was that in?
that was in right up on the border between Niger and Nigeria.
Right, yeah, that hinterland part's especially
Yeah.
dicey, isn't it? Did you know when you were there? Did you know it was a sort of higher risk environment you were walking into?
Yeah, I remember staying in a hotel one night, which you'd struggle to classify as a hotel actually. I think the bed moved. There was stuff living in it, so
Oh my God!
I slept with a.
And this is African stuff. This isn't just like bed bugs, you know.
I slept with the chair against the door because there's no lock on the door. I got up that morning. I remember going down to the kitchen thinking, is there any breakfast? Opened the kitchen door and rats run everywhere, so I skipped breakfast.
That sounds like a yes to me.
Went out to do some site surveys, come back that day, and I was told couldn't go near the hotel because it'd been burnt down whilst you were away.
Right.
Thankfully, I didn't leave my luggage there. So, yeah.
And why was it? What, was it an accident or was it arson?
I think some sort of tribal dispute.
And so what's this being taken hostage? What was that all about?
I think it was the local authorities wanting to make some money out of me.
Oh, it was like a ransom thing.
It was a little ransom thing, yes. Yeah.
Blimey.
No harm done in the making of.
Right. Did
but,
the ransom get paid?
a little bit, I think.
A little bit. Which you were relieved about.
Home.
Were you given any kind of narrative as to what would happen to you if the ransom wasn't paid?
Well, he just kept poking the AK-47 at me, so I took that
You're like
as
Captain Phillips.
That's not a friendly gesture, is it?
No, it's not. No.
Oh God.
Right. So I bet you're happy to just be stuck in. Where did you say you lived? Cheltenham.
Cheltenham based.
A bit calmer.
A bit less of that.
Calmer.
in Cheltenham.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I always think, like, because you mentioned Congo, that always seems to be the place that if you go there, almost you're bound to have some kind of problem.
Do you know what? I have vivid memories of turning up in Kinshasa, and I'd just come out of the airport and
Which country's that in?
Congo.
DRC,
That's Congo,
yeah,
right.
and pulled up to a set of traffic lights in chaos. And a UN peacekeeping tank pulled up beside us.
Right.
And I thought, I really shouldn't be here, should I? Yeah.
And then they went. Do you know the way to
Left or right?
this place? Oh, sorry, mate. I just turned up myself. We've got to go and keep some peace over there. Do you have anything else, Ian, before we move on to like newsy stuff? All right. Well, thanks a lot for that, Darren. Did you actually, Darren? More to point, is there anything else to do with TXO or your colourful life?
No, I enjoyed that.
that we haven't covered that you'd like to.
No, can I come back one day?
Of course, totally. But you've got to have been held to ransom again.
Okay.
We need a new one of those.
Yeah, Blackfriars.
In
You just go
Cheltenham.
stumbling around sub-Saharan Africa in the hope of justifying your next appearance on the pod. Okay, so like news. So Darren, we always, even when we have a guest, we'll do a
I
bit
don't
of
think we
news.
should do that one first. I think we should do your one.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Sure. And we always say to our guests, look, I mean, we're journalists. We can say what the fuck we want. There's very little we can get in trouble for.
That's clear. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You can tell that from the tone of the pod. And so, you just join in to the extent that you want or don't. It's totally fine. That you can plead the fifth. It's all good. So one thing I wrote yesterday before going and meeting up with BT for lunch was Boldin, who we had the CEO of Boldin on the pod just a couple of weeks ago, and TfL, Transport for London, both sent out a press release, the same press release, that was titled "More stations and tube lines across central London get high-speed mobile coverage."
Not the ones that I use.
Well, quite. And actually, I just think even that headline is quite equivocating. I mean, from a journalistic point of view, you'd never use as a headline hook more something. You'd want an absolute data point or some kind of definitive statement. Not there's been a bit more of this thing than there was yesterday. That's not a headline, is it? It's not a hook. So that immediately sort of made me think, hello, what's going on here? Yeah, and anyway, and my headline I put for it.
Less would have been a headline.
Yeah. Yeah, we can't be bothered with mobile anymore. That would have been good. And my headline was, London Mayor continues to gaslight the public over tube connectivity. And gaslight, for people who don't know this relatively contemporary term, it's contemporary, but I think it refers to like a 1930s film. But basically it means it means trying to sort of deceive people and convince people about a sort of alternative reality. And I think in the gaslighting, it was some abusive husband who used to turn down the gas on a light and then tell his missus that, she goes, it got darker, and he goes, no, everything's cool. And he's trying to drive her mental by doing that.
What sounds like an Alfred Hitchcock film or something.
That sort of thing, yeah, exactly. That sort of thing. In fact, I even linked to...
I saw the ultimate gaslighting on Instagram a few years ago where it's like if your kids are being really annoying when you put the TV on, put it in Chinese and then say, what do you mean you don't understand? You must be really tired.
That's cruel. No, you're giving PTSD if you do that.
Yeah. Well, I don't understand. What do you mean you don't understand?
Your kids have already got to deal with 3 languages. You're going to throw that at them?
No, I've never done that.
Yet. Anyway, look, here's the Wikipedia summary of gaslighting. Gaslighting is a colloquialism loosely defined as manipulating someone into questioning their own perception of reality. The expression, which derives from the title of a 1944, so I was a bit early, film Gaslight, became popular in the mid-2010s. Merriam-Webster cites deception of one's memory, perception of reality, or mental stability.
Who directed Gaslight?
Handily, Wikipedia has a hyperlink. American psychological thriller directed by George Cukor, C-U-K-O-R, starring Charles Boyer, Ingrid Bergman, I've heard of her.
Yeah, we know
her. And Angela Lansbury, Murder, She Wrote. Look, this is her when she was young.
She was a kid, yeah. Well,
she doesn't look any different.
Teenager.
See, all your listeners are going to go watch that now.
Yeah, exactly. You get a total value for tangents on this podcast. Anyway, and so I went with that as my headline because, and I'll get into it a bit more. This is actually as much a sort of.
Oh, George Cukor did My Fair Lady later. Sorry.
Okay, cool.
Audrey Hepburn.
Yeah. This is as much a sort of communications, PR messaging story as it is a telecom story. And so I went on to say, and so the substance of it was that there was a bit of incremental progress with a few more stations, like the rest of the Elizabeth line, getting 4G. Now, one thing I'd wonder, I mean, you mentioned the Elizabeth line earlier. It's a really new tube line. I don't get why it didn't have 4G fucking from day one. I mean, why didn't they just put all that shit in straight away? Or if they did, then maybe it's a problem with...
But it sounds like they did.
...getting it fired up. I know, but...
Isn't it good on the Elizabeth line, but not so good on other lines?
It is, but only now. I mean, how long's the Elizabeth line been around?
A year.
Right, I'm going to have to look that up now. Anyway.
Isn't there still a bit of a struggle with tunnel sort of
access?
RF distribution?
Well,
the tube here is very deep, yeah.
When we had the Boldin CEO on the podcast and we did talk a bit about...
Igor.
He was saying that one of the challenges is they can only get access to the area for about 4 hours every day out of 24.
Yeah.
Because
of course
there's tubes running and then there's maintenance work that needs to be done as well. And so you send you guys down there, but they literally get down
and come
out again. do one thing and then have a coffee break.
And then they're legging it.
Then they're legging
fucking tubes have started again.
Trying to probably get run over.
Yeah.
Yeah, like some Roadrunner film. What's that, a cartoon?
Back to the Future 3, just like
that's all fine. And I didn't really. I probably could have had asked some more questions of Bolden in this piece. And maybe one of the reasons I didn't is because I just met Igor. But I also thought, I mean, I get that they've got certain logistical challenges, and I'm sure if this thing is going slower than everyone thinks it should, which I understand is the case, because they've been banging on about this for at least 5 years. So it feels like progress has been slow, and they've still only got like a minority of underground tube lines covered. So that's not great progress over 5 years, if you ask me.
What I don't get is why other countries seem to be able to do this when we can't. Like if you go on the Barcelona metro, you get really good mobile signals everywhere.
Eurotunnel got it.
No, it's bad on the.
Yeah,
in the shuttle there is connection.
Yeah, there's Wi-Fi on the Eurostar.
No. As in the car one, there is connection.
What, all the way through? Have you done it recently? You've had it all the way through?
Yeah.
I presume with young kids, you want to be able to plug them into iPads.
Yeah, it's not very...
You can't get it on the train.
It switches.
It's really, the cellular coverage is really bad, and the Wi-Fi coverage is really bad as well.
I don't know what to tell you.
My last experience, I mean, I'll defer to Pierre, who obviously... being from that side of the channel.
I've been streaming the whole way, 20 minutes. So.
Right, well, I'll defer to that.
Maybe like preloaded enough, but...
Do you know, I'll check it. I'm going to France on the tunnel this summer.
Yeah.
So
does this point towards we're just not designed to live underground?
Could be that. We're not hobbits or whatever.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Line's been around for 2 years, by the way, so I still think if it's taken them 2 years from where it presumably had fibre as part of the build-out, I think 2 years is still quite a long time. Anyway, I'm not saying whose fault it is. It could be... and I certainly don't know to what extent Baldwin's culpable. I mean, we touched on it briefly with Igor, and he mentioned that little window at the end of which they've got to be legging it from the trains when they start up again.
2 years between then and having 4G in it is not... Like those other lines have been around for 100 years. They didn't get 4G at the start, did they?
But this is my point. I would have thought the infrastructure was just there from day one.
Yeah.
So why is it taking 2 years to turn it on?
So is it all in the stations?
Well, that's a really good question.
Which is easier.
I can see why you're CEO. You ask all the top questions. It is all in the stations. So that's part of the story as well. It's all very well having it in the stations, but then once you get on the tube, if you get cut off, that's a frustrating user experience, isn't it?
Well, that's when you want it.
Yeah.
Is what? In the station?
No, in the tube.
All right, well, there we are. Well, so like I said, my piece was more having a pop up their comms. So
they're claiming to have done a lot, and you're saying they haven't.
Exactly, and so I'll just read some of what I wrote. I went, as with so many coverage claims, the devil's in the detail. Firstly, all above ground stations should have had 5G coverage for over a decade. So don't even talk to me about above ground one, because that doesn't even count, does it?
Well,
what?
Stations or lines?
Stations. That's why I said stations.
But not lines.
No.
Okay.
Because they're not above ground. Although I suppose above ground lines. No, sorry, you're right.
And they have very bad 5G coverage on those lines.
4G, I said.
Yeah, well, they have very bad 4G and 5G coverage.
No, you're right. But a lot of the...
Do you know why?
I don't.
Because in the UK, there are regulations about how high you can build masts that are less stringent in other parts of Europe.
I didn't know that.
So along the sides of railway tracks, I think just build out's quite challenging anyway, but you can't build like 20 metres or something. It's like, and it makes a big difference Darryl would know this more than I do, building higher towers, you get much better, much better coverage.
Risk of falling, maybe?
Yeah.
I don't know, but
it sounds like just bureaucratic bollocks to me.
This is from Vodafone's technology people, by the way.
Planning permissions, isn't it? And what they're allowed to do.
They've just decided arbitrarily to pick a height and stick with it.
You're upset about the tubes not having good coverage. You can go on a train journey anywhere in the UK and it just cuts out constantly. It's above ground, underground, it pants.
To slightly defend my position, I wouldn't say I'm upset about the coverage.
In this
I'm
building,
upset about...
right here, in this room.
In this room's terrible. But then we're different. We've spoken about it in this office. One of the reasons the mobile coverage in here sucks is because we're one of those shiny corporate buildings that's got reflective windows, and apparently, just as it reflects light, it reflects radio waves as well.
Wi-Fi is brilliant in here, though.
I know, it is. Anyway, and then I said, secondly, as you just touched on, Darren, station coverage doesn't count tunnels. And I said, in fact, it's not clear what proportion of a station needs to have mobile connectivity for such a claim to be valid. So when you say the station's covered, do you mean like the escalators as well, or the platform, or everything? So this, like I said, this is more a comms thing. I just don't like it when they try and gaslight you and try and take the piss. And then I said, and then I said, lastly, why is this incremental progress being publicised at all when there's still such a long way to go? And then I really, I've got to admit, I don't like Sadiq Khan. He just winds me up. It just seems like such an archetypal venal politician to me. And I said he's been banging on about it for 5 years, and in 2021 proclaimed that the whole project be complete by the end of this year, 2024. And then I said, but in this announcement, they quietly say the Mayor has committed to completing work across all of London Underground, Docklands Light Railway, London Overground and Elizabeth Line by the end of 2025. So they just snuck in a 1 year delay. And and then you look at the BBC coverage or the Standard, none of them mention it. They're all so compliant.
That's a good spot.
It's properly sly, isn't it?
That's proper journalism, Scott.
Well, I'm known for it, mate. And then there's a little quote, a little slimy quote from Khan where he goes, I promise that customers will be able to access high-speed mobile coverage at all stations and in tunnels, and I'm pleased to see how quickly the team are moving to enable 4G and 5G connectivity. No, they're not. They're a year behind what you said they were going to be a year ago.
Eventually,
do you know what I mean?
That's a good story.
Yeah.
But who are the team? Who's actually responsible for it?
Well, Baldwin's a big part of it. And I genuinely don't know if... I don't know whether this is a fuck up. I must assume it is if their deadlines slip by a year. But maybe this is one of those things, like with so many infrastructure projects like HS2, where everyone just expects the price to go up and the timelines to slip, and there's just a sort of.
Have you, since publishing that, have you had any sort of people reaching out to you and saying?
No, I wish Khan's lot had. I would have had fun with them.
He's not connected.
Yeah.
People hardly ever fucking bollock me about my stuff. I'm actually careful what you wish for. I actually wish they did it more.
Not bollocking you as such, but it'd be interesting if someone involved in the project got in touch and went, well, hang on a minute, here's what here's what's really kind of
bang out of order.
Maybe I'll get.
Here's who's to blame.
Maybe Eagle will get in touch and you go, I bought you a bottle of wine, and it's the fucking thanks I get.
Maybe they'll walk you down a tunnel.
Oh, that'd be scary, wouldn't it?
Well,
and then you get those two little headlights.
You ever raced the subway?
They're going to offer you an opportunity to go and see what
That'll
they
be
do
it.
at night,
And
then all of a sudden everybody disappears.
No, you're like a Western. They'll just tie you to the tracks. Yeah.
No, that'll be what happens. Sadiq Khan's people will get in touch and we go, we really like that, Scott, and we want to give you some really constructive feedback. We thought we'd do it in the middle of a tunnel. And then, as you say, then they just leg it.
2 a.m. good for you? 2 a.m. good?
But to protect security, we need to put this blindfold on while we take you into the tunnel. And then they take it off, and then I'm all by myself, and there's a woo woo. Anyway,
a woo woo.
Wireless, and back in 2019, they were tasked with putting in the first 4G along the Jubilee line, but they always used to talk about the complexity of putting in 4G coverage versus a lot of other metros across the world, because when we built our tube, it was all kind of, it's not in straight lines.
bit windy.
So they used to talk a lot about signal propagation along the tunnels, and saying how complex it was.
Right.
It's more modern.
Because radio waves
metros.
like to go in a straight line, don't they?
Basically,
Yeah. Yeah, just like visible light or whatever. Cool. But anyway, and there were just a few little data points that I thought were interesting. So, what was it they said? I can't remember. They told, they got a little map. But basically, there's only a small proportion still of all these underground ones have been covered. All the underground stations, like physically underground, as opposed to the name for the tube. I'm
just shocked that it's so much work. So my two experiences of this recently were
a quarter, by the way. It was a quarter so far of the underground tube stations.
Madrid, where I was at the same show that Paul was at, Fuse, last year, and Barcelona, obviously, for Mobile World Congress. And you're on the metro systems there, which are underground lines, and they're pretty old as well. It's not like they're that much younger. I don't think the London Underground bits of them. And you could get 4G, 5G signals, really good ones, by the way, everywhere. In fact, people almost take it for granted that that's what you do on the tube there, is you sit down and you get an opportunity to go to your emails or whatever.
In Paris, the metro is very well connected.
There's another one. So why is it that we're struggling with it so much?
I knew he'd come out with some French,
like a
pro-French thing.
No, but isn't it a depth thing? Because like the Paris one is really shallow, but here it's really deep.
Right.
You go down several...
Okay.
So I think, like, and then on it may be, and then on top of what Paul was said about us being more windy and less straight lines, but these are all engineering problems, aren't they? And where there's a will, there's a way. It still says to me that somehow, whether it's money, whether it's efficiency, whether it's just just management, or it's just Sadiq Khan being a twat, that
you are going to be in trouble now. You know, you were joking about getting taken down a tunnel and left on your own.
I honestly think in
That's
terms of being rude about people, politicians are completely fair game. I think they put their head above the trench, and it's sort of the journalist's job to be a bit of a dick to politicians, in my opinion. So that's my defence. Do you need another in?
I don't know if I should, because otherwise I'll be.
That sounds like a yes.
My legs. Well, I'm already.
There you go,
How
mate.
much longer have we got?
There you go. Your wish is my command. We got one more segment after this, so I'll wrap this one up soon. I mean, so yeah, they said only a quarter of the below ground ones have got it, and then they said that they reckon 80% of all stations, and actually that they had a quote which I thought was hilarious. There was a quote in the press release that says, "When combined with tube stations that are above ground," which I think is a redundant thing to say. That means more than 2/3 of all stations on the tube network now have mobile coverage available. And then apparently 80%, so 2/3 is 67%, so a further 13 percentage points are going to be done by the end of the year. And now they've said end of 2015.
And none of this mentions what the actual line coverage is.
No,
It's all about
that doesn't come up
stations.
once. That doesn't come up once.
So I
Although-
suspect on the lines, it's really pathetic. You get ones like the Jubilee line where you think you can get it pretty well.
Yeah.
But other than that,
Actually, they have got a map.
You've got a
which
little map.
Yeah, if you go to my story, the map does. I've just realised on the key, it's got tunnel section now live, tunnel section live by the end of summer 2024. So there's a lot to hold them account. Hardly any of the tunnel sections are now live. I think we've got a bit of the central line is looking live.
yeah, I
This is-
seem to remember going on the central line and not being too.
Yeah, but anyway, they've got a long way to go, and anyway, most of it's greyed out. So they've got a long
That's
way
the
to go.
Jubilee line.
Very good. They got a long way to go, even if they're going to hit their 2015 one. And I promise you, I'll be the first to call them out if that slips again.
If you can get a signal.
One thing before we move on from that, Darren, you did make a good point, because I do give our guests some kind of advance warning of other shit we might talk about, so they can decide, you know, how little or much they can say without getting sacked. And you made the point of like, do we necessarily want coverage on the underground, which I thought was a good one in terms of just normal, like digital mental health sort of thing.
Where can you hide these days?
Yeah, exactly.
I was telling you, I had MRI the other day. I actually enjoyed it. No one could call me. No one could talk to me.
A few people say that.
How long was it? How long did it take?
I don't know, 20 minutes or something.
20 minutes. God, so you're so plugged in that even 20 minutes.
So you're laying down. No one could talk to you. No one could call you.
Yeah, the
Did
fact.
they even play music for you?
I declined. They offered me Radio 2, which
I can see where you're coming from.
I didn't get offered any radio when I had a scan. I just had to sit there for half an hour.
And just think about all the gamma rays
Yeah.
pumping into your body, turning you into the Incredible Hulk.
it felt good for me. Felt good. Yeah.
Okay, well, I won't ask what that was about, but I hope it's all cleared up.
Getting old.
Yeah, but no, I think that is a good point. Obviously, with the ubiquitous connectivity. I mean, I think as I just said earlier, I'm a parent of a 20-year-old and a 17-year-old, and disconnecting them from digital devices is a challenge.
But there's some tubes, like sweaty armpit next to you,
Yeah,
bad
yeah.
breath next to you. What do you actually want to be?
Yeah, commuter time on the tube. How productive are you going to be, even if you got it the whole time?
Well, often you're standing up anyway, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah.
It's hard to do something constructive, even though you've got connectivity.
This is all to be able to load TikTok and Instagram. It's not to.
I mean, people don't do useful things, do they? They watch
Yeah.
they watch TikTok videos of someone dancing stupidly.
stream a podcast.
So maybe it's all just a fucking waste of time. Why are they
Yeah,
bothering?
all this.
Are we
'Cause
just
they're not-
Are we just the wrong demographic to review this?
Probably.
No, they'll stream this podcast.
And they don't make any money out of it either. A few years ago, I assumed that there would be some kind of clever way of them charging a premium. Like, you know, even if you're, as I am, an E-subscriber, you got to pay some little extra $5 a month or whatever to get that. Or maybe even micropayments, like each time you go on the tube. But no, they don't. There's no... All it is just being able to say to their customers, yeah, we've done this for you as well. So it's part of that central problem that they've got that we've spoken about loads of times on the pod, where operators are being asked to do more and more, but they can't find ways of getting more money out of people on the back of it.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. And then, Ian, like it's been a short week, so you haven't written that much, but
It's only Wednesday.
yeah, exactly.
That's long.
And you were out on the lash all day yesterday.
Yeah.
So was your lack of
Don't say
productivity?
things like that.
Was
Otherwise
your lack of
Phil will
productivity
go-
noticed yesterday? Was Phil like, Ian, were you working on a really long story yesterday? That's my Phil. I don't think I've ever done a Phil impression. Phil's got a sort of baritone Texan drawl,
Yeah. No, he's not. He's not really Texan. I don't think.
isn't he? Well, he lives in Texas. I assume.
Yeah, but he's
he had
not
a
from
Texan
Texas.
accent. Oh, right,
Alabama.
right.
No, you are. No, he's not. He's not from Alabama, is he? I didn't even know that. I thought he lived in the northeast originally. But anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Newcastle.
So he's from the south. Yeah, Newcastle.
Newcastle.
It's a part Geordie, part Texan accent.
Where's your story, man? And he looks a little bit like Kevin Bacon. So he
does
could
look a
be
bit like
Kevin
Kevin
Bacon out of
Bacon.
Tremors. I think Kevin Bacon was Southerner in Tremors.
Yeah. He looks quite young for his age, Phil. I would
does.
think.
It does. It's a handsome man.
Yeah.
Phil. Anyway.
So we'll be all right now that we've said that.
No,
We'll be in trouble for not writing it.
So now Ian dossing yesterday instead of doing any work is all right. Anyway, but he was dossing with BT times 2. I mean,
I was getting all the inside information on BT.
it was Telecoms dossing.
Yeah.
But you did manage to write a story on... Oh, this was yesterday. Fair play to you.
Yeah.
Was it before you came out?
That was on Monday, but I had 2 stories that went up yesterday.
Oh, okay.
I did Rakuten's results as well.
Well, I'll just say the headline and I'll stop talking shit and let you tell us what it's all about. So the headline, with the accent over the O on Telefonica, I'm impressed. Telefonica
That's
Germany.
The sort of attention to detail you get with
Yeah,
light reading.
exactly. You get lots of people not putting the O there. The Spanish will be pleased. And by the way, the reason it's relevant is there's always the emphasis on the penultimate vowel in Spanish, unless there's an accent to tell you otherwise. So it would be Telefonica if it wasn't for that accent. So Telefonica Germany turns to AWS. They say, I don't like AWS, Nokia. I prefer AWS and Nokia.
Do you know why that's there?
Why?
Because someone makes a fuss about overdoing it on the number of on the sort of
Characters.
character count.
Yeah. I know. I always think that's a slightly false economy in the digital age. Like, quite a lot of people
So do I.
abbreviate government and put GOVT. And I'm thinking, well, did you need to free up those 4 characters that much? Just fucking write it in full. There aren't enough N's in headlines.
I mean, it's very newspapery, isn't it?
Exactly. I think people are still stuck in that paradigm. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'll overlook at this once. Telefonica Journey turns to AWS, Nokia in Cloud Core threat to Ericsson. So what's that all about?
Well, the news actually came out the previous week, if you
Okay.
remember, which was this. The reason it's significant is the companies are pitching it as the first time that a telco has put its core on the public cloud.
Right.
The first time a brownfield operator has put its core network on the public cloud.
Right. So as opposed to someone like Dish
So
or
the
Rakuten.
big example that everybody comes out with is Dish. Exactly. Rakuten's not on the public cloud.
Oh, okay. I just named all the greenfield ones I could think of.
Yeah, I mean, you'd expect it to be a greenfield, and the big greenfield example is Dish, which is an AWS.
And they're all in on AWS.
They're all
aren't
in on AWS, and but the difference there is that they're obviously building from scratch. A lot of the legacy stuff that we were just talking about with Darren doesn't exist, so it's easier when you're starting from scratch to kind of do that. And there's been a resistance anyway among a lot of operators to go all in with the public cloud. As we talk about all the time on this podcast, people aren't that keen on. They're quite happy to put sort of standard IT workloads on the public cloud, like your CRM systems perhaps, and then maybe stuff that's a bit more closely sort of in the
stuff that's always just been
OSS, but certainly not things like the 5G core. And then it's really hard to do it anyway with the radio access network applications, because it sort of needs to be deployed at the edge of the network.
So historically,
anyway.
the core's always been on sort of on-premise, like servers and stuff.
Yeah. So in an on-premises like facility basically, and they're pitching this very much as a public cloud. And now purists might take issue with the public cloud pitch, because it's if you talk to Microsoft's doing similar things with AT&T in the US, and more recently Etisalat in the Middle East. And they don't present what they're doing as the public cloud. They're very sort of keen to sort of distance themselves from this public cloud label. They say it's the hybrid cloud.
Well, Microsoft, that's their whole pitch, is that they're into hybrid cloud, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's almost like they're trying to preempt our objection to putting all your eggs in one basket.
But there's no real difference here between the two models. It's just one of them is very much making it out to be the public cloud, and one of them is very sort of insistent on this hybrid cloud pitch. And by the hybrid cloud, what they mean is you've got some instances where they're using an AWS, a Microsoft or AWS data center that's in Germany, let's say. But other applications would run on Telefonica Germany's own facilities, basically. So it's kind of the public cloud technology stack deployed in a private cloud environment. Yeah. In the same way that someone like the people that kind of do that and are known for it, people like Red Hat and Wind River and VMware, or operators doing it themselves. So BT, for instance, has this telco cloud that it's developed with Canonical. And they're kind of very resistant. If you talk to people like Howard Watson, who's the CTO there, they're quite resistant to the idea of going and putting telco workloads on the public cloud. One of the reasons they're resistant, by the way, is not that they think it's like technologically shit. It's more to do with like regulatory compliance. So you have these rules about data sovereignty.
Yeah. And Europe's really big on that, and GDPR.
The UK is really big on it in Germany. Now Germany's really big on data sovereignty, but the way they've overcome it in Germany is AWS has its own facilities in Germany, basically. If you open up a AWS cloud in Germany, then
and you can't be piping that data over to the States.
No, exactly. And they have to be quite careful about who has control of the data, and how they guarantee that, I don't know, but it's, it's very sort of strong pitch about Telefonica having ownership of the data that's stored there and this sort of thing. But some of it's clearly some of it is not in a data center that you would regard as a public cloud data center, where you're on a server that might be used by other companies as well. That's what the public cloud is really. It's in a Telefonica facility, and it's running.
But with loads of AWS.
With AWS kit and software and everything
services and stuff.
it, basically.
Yeah, because that's always been my... I don't really... I can't claim to understand the underlying technology and the mechanics of how these public cloud players operate, because obviously their interface, they're sort of playing with the outside world is just to say, here you go, tap into this, but then under that they're giving you access to these football stadium sized data centers and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But my worry's always been about control.
Yeah, and that's the other reason that people like BT and the guys who resist that model don't want to do it. It's like a ceding of power to big tech, and they're already concerned about losing some of that anyway. I think with the way that the over the top, that's the term that gets used, isn't it? Over the top services, and moving from a kind of the old voice world of 2G and early 3G to a world where everybody's using WhatsApp or whatever it might be. They're not in control of that anymore. So this is losing control on the kind of technology side of it as well, I think, to some extent. They kind of you get this feeling, I think, among some CTOs that they should be the guys doing the infrastructure platforms that support the applications they're running. The 5G core network is something
but it feels like there's a creep, there's a salami slicing.
It's a total creep.
Like a year ago, they go, nah, we'll keep that in-house.
Yeah.
And then a year later, they go, all right, fuck it. They can do that
and the guy whose photo's there, the one that you were commenting on how wonderful his moustache is.
Yeah, I've got to say this. So he's called Malik Rao.
Yeah.
And he's got a magnificent handlebar moustache. And I've just got Malik, if you're listening, fair play to you. Not everyone can pull off a tash like that, but you have, mate. You smashed it.
Yeah, I kind of know him a bit. I met him at Mobile World Congress, and he's not. I don't think he's actually quoted in the story, but he's the guy who's led this.
You thought his tash was so good.
Well, he's obviously the guy who's decided on this approach.
Right. Okay.
He's very much the architect of this strategy. He's very kind of enthusiastic about using the public cloud where you can, and obviously the attractions of using the public cloud. One of them is economic. We talked about this. The idea that if you can scale up and down very easily. The fact that it's shared infrastructure there's obviously going to be things like energy savings there.
All the stuff Danielle Royston would approve of.
You're not buying your own IT. You're not buying your own servers and having to maintain them and having staff to maintain them. It's all looked after by AWS. It's all managed by AWS. This explains the concern about loss of control, but the flip side of that is huge savings, potentially. Yeah. Depending, obviously, on what you're paying AWS.
Yes, it's a slightly Faustian pact, isn't it? So I always think it's a bit of a Faustian pact.
It's
you're selling a bit of your soul, but you're getting something in return.
Tenant, in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, totally, that as well.
But then the other advantage, the other attraction of it, I think, the other big one is they're just incredibly technologically sophisticated. Nobody would dispute that. We see that with generative AI and what they're doing there. So you can tap into all these other services that somebody like AWS has. You can take advantage of. One good example that I think I cited in the story is this chip that they've developed themselves, the Graviton chip, which is a CPU that they would use as an alternative
2000.
You'd use that as an alternative to some sort of x86 based server. It uses like ARM architecture, and they've talked about the energy sort of savings you can get from that. And it's not actually being used at the moment, by the way, in this instance. But it's an example of something that they could leverage.
Just scrolling down.
So those are the reasons that you might want to do it. The reasons you wouldn't want to do it are probably regulatory and just concern about you're more and more becoming a company that's not maybe in charge of its own destiny. The interesting thing about it, which one of the reasons I wrote it and is in the headline that wasn't picked up in the initial news coverage, is people just seem to assume that all of a sudden it's doing a 5G core arrangement, and it didn't have anything before that, whereas it did. So Telefonica Germany, what it's done up to now is actually use Ericsson as the provider not only of the 5G core applications, the kind of packet core stuff that you need to run your 5G network, but also the infrastructure platforms. Okay. So the private cloud was Ericsson. Ericsson's doing that. They have two things. They have one called
Ericsson's Cloud.
Ericsson's Cloud, yeah.
Right.
So it's like bringing stuff into your your data center, but they provide all the kind of packaging around that and the service, this kind of service wrap. So they have two. They have NFVI, which is Network Functions Virtualization Infrastructure, and they have another one called CNIS, which is Cloud Native Infrastructure Solution, which is more like Kubernetes based. So that's the more up to date one. But you basically had what they call a full stack offering, where Ericsson's packet core stuff was running on Ericsson's cloud platform.
Yeah.
What's happening? What I think you can surmise from, because I only managed to get people talking to me on background on some of this, and it's a bit unclear what's going on. But what seems to be happening is that AWS is dislodging Ericsson as the kind of infrastructure platform.
Yes,
because if you bring AWS,
isn't that surprising, is it?
if you bring so it's a loss for Ericsson, because if you bring AWS in and you've still got Ericsson there, you've got two platforms in the mix, which is not an efficient way to do it in the long run, potentially. You know, and what they've got about 45 million mobile customers, I think, Telefonica Germany. So at the moment, their short-term target is to move 1 million onto this new AWS platform, which is basically a scaling back of what Ericsson supports at the moment. But Malik Rao is talking about 30 to 40% in the next few years. But why would they stop there? You know, the operators these days, what they talk about
if
doing...
it's a good idea for a fraction of them, why isn't it a good idea for
The one thing operators want to do, whether it's public cloud or private cloud, is they want to have one infrastructure platform, one cloud platform that supports everything. You know, so you have whether it's what BT's doing with Canonical, or whether it's this AWS thing, or whether it's Microsoft with Azure Nexus, they have that, and it supports all the telco workloads and maybe even the IT workloads as well. So you put your 5G core on it, you put other workloads, that potentially the radio access network stuff, some of it in the future. You might run BSS and OSS on it, and you get the efficiency of just having this one platform that supports all your applications.
Yeah.
If you have...
And it's hard to argue with all of that.
If you have applications that are married to particular platforms, you get silos. You get these silos in the system, and you've got more management and you've got more cost, obviously, by doing that. So they were very much pushed back on the idea that they're phasing out Ericsson. And I think Ericsson would still be there as a applications provider, as somebody doing packet core software. But their CNIS and NFVI stuff, I think, is probably destined for the dustbin kind of thing. Not outside Telefonica Germany, by the way, but I think in Telefonica Germany's network.
So a broader concern, Darren, that we often come up with about these hyperscalers, as they're often referred to, is not their competence, as Ian just detailed. You know, there's a reason. I think they're all there on merit. There's a reason why they're the likes of AWS, Google, Azure, and other in other areas, American big tech like Meta or whatever, are so dominant. Is because they provide something that everyone wants, and they've also just done scale incredibly well. But you know, a concern that we often just talk about is, fair enough, you got there on merit, but there does come a point where regulation and antitrust kicks in just to say, well, like, I think there's a thing, you know, it's not a segment here, but Europe's having another little look at Teams, Microsoft Teams, and you know, it's our default thing. That's how we communicate internally, as Teams, both through text and video calls. Yeah. And I'm sure one of the reasons we do it is because it's just thrown in with Office and thrown in with Windows. And so it's back to that thing of like Internet Explorer back 20 years ago, where, yes, you've got to this dominant position on merit, but that does also mean that extra scrutiny and skepticism must be attached to every new thing you do, because you're basically able to distort the market by your size and dominance.
Well, I think it's systemic risk is the thing that I worry about, because if you've only got 3 hyperscalers, and if everybody's thinking the same way that Telefonica Germany is, like, oh, it's so obvious we should put everything on a hyperscaler platform because of the economic attractions of doing it, then you've potentially got this situation in the future where outside China and a few other markets that might be resistant to US big tech, all the world's networks could be running on either AWS, Google Cloud,
so that
or
single
Microsoft.
point of failure.
And then it's shared infrastructure, yeah. So it's not just telecom networks that are running on it, by the way. It's like banking systems and various other things, various retail companies that have put their IT in the public cloud, which pretty much everybody would want to do these days. That's one area, the kind of standard IT stuff. People don't have much resistance to that. But if something, we've seen this last year actually, a couple of outages, weren't there? Akamai, first of all, which is not the big player in the sense that someone like AWS is. But then I think there was an AWS outage in one area that brought
and you get
down
all these people
quite
who
a
are
lot
involved in
of-
making the internet work. Sometimes something will go Pete Tong.
then all of a sudden certain websites aren't working and you're thinking what's going on here, and no, but one thing I found interesting
Cloudflare,
about
there's another one.
Cloudflare went down,
yeah.
but people were sort of, I remember reading a couple of comment pieces trying to look at the sort of economic cost of it even over a few hours, and nobody had any figures. But it's really disruptive to startups in particular that are already quite reliant on the public cloud. If you've got an outage that lasts a couple, they've got them back up and going fairly quickly, to be honest with you, in fairness to them. They've only been out for 2 or 3 hours, I think, the ones that have happened. But you always think if it's something worse, if it's some like China-directed cyber attack to take out part of AWS, and all the world's 5G core networks now are on AWS,
Yeah,
Microsoft,
exactly.
and Google Cloud.
No, it's a massive vulnerability. And then
the systemic
if you're going to
risk
take
in
it
there.
even further, we got the example of what happened to a social media platform called, I think it was Gab. No, Parler, that's it. And Parler, a few years ago, it was one of those places that everyone who got kicked off of like Facebook and Twitter for being too mental, which normally meant too politically right-wing, ended up on this Parler place. And granted, there were probably a lot of loons and a lot of people who make Alex Jones look like the most fucking even-handed person. But it still had content moderation stuff. People couldn't say illegal shit like incitements to violence and all that sort of thing. But the weight of public opinion and political opinion went against Parler, so much so that AWS just cut them off. And that's the power that someone like AWS has got. They can just unilaterally go, right, no, you're not allowed on the internet anymore, and their business is gone. It's a bit like this is a peril that people have who make their business on YouTube. You get lots of YouTubers, whether they're sort of musicians or commentators or whatever. But at any stage, YouTube can just pull the plug because Google, which owns YouTube, has got the power to just go, nah, fuck you. And that happens all the time. And so that's the other thing that worries me. Yeah, you were talking about accidental, a lack of redundancy or a choke point through accidental or through foreign malevolent interference. But I think also just about this more sort of dystopian Orwellian stuff where something's just decided to be beyond the pale in a political sense, and that gets cut off.
Well, the worry is that even if it's not political, if you have an issue with AWS all of a sudden and you're deciding, I don't want to use AWS anymore, I want to move to Microsoft or I want to move to another cloud environment, that's apparently really, really hard to do. It's not like moving from Ericsson to Nokia in the radio access network. Or Huawei is a better example. They have to take out Huawei equipment and put in somebody else instead, and everybody's doing that now. And there's some expense involved in that, but you can do it. That's a job you can manage.
And you ring up Darren, get him involved.
Yeah. Whereas moving from one cloud to another is, what did Scott Petty say it was?
Pain in the arse.
Yeah.
Like you said.
So he's Vodafone's CTO.
Yeah, CTO.
It's just really
and I just asked him
difficult
at a press thing. I just said, this is something that Ian and I had been speaking to each other for a while, and I just thought I'd ask him, see what he says. And this is one of the things about being a journalist. Sometimes you ask questions and 9 times out of 10 people will give you the sort of quite like talking point approved media trained answer, and every now and then they'll shoot from the hip, and that was a good answer. I mean, it wasn't very contentious, it was just very, Scott Petty's like that, he's an Aussie, he's sort of plain speaking guy while also obviously being very bright. And he just said it's a pain in the arse, and it is. And this is another thing that antitrust people are looking at, is whether there is extra impediments put in.
Yeah. Well, I think there've been some movements recently to get rid of those egress fees, they're called, aren't
That's
they?
it.
For when you try and come out of a cloud, but it's still like you might take advantage of certain, because it's not standardized. It's not like telco networks where it's all based on 3GPP standards, and the idea is that allows you to move from one to another to a certain extent with portability. They've developed their own special services that might not have an equivalent in, like Microsoft might not have an equivalent in AWS or in Google. So you come away from that and you just lose it basically, and you might have a whole series of services and products that are based on it.
And like we made comparisons before when we're talking about iOS and Android.
Yeah,
but especially I know Pierre, are so all in on iOS that even if you fancy to go at Android, it'd be such a pain in the arse to access your content and various other services that you're just not going to do it, are you? So I got one last thing to ask you about, unless Darren, I haven't really invited you in on this, but partly it's because I figured if you had something to say, you would have just butted in.
No, we're good at being sheep, aren't we? We follow the easiest path, and
Yeah.
we're not at a stage yet where we've seen some of these big players merging or going under, and like we have in the telco and the OEM world.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the complexity, the integration. If one of them goes under or two decide to join,
Yeah.
the complexity just grows and grows and grows.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing though, is that I think if this will be one of Danielle Royston's pushbacks, is like you go on about problems and like what if something happens to AWS or Microsoft and you're left in the lurch, and she'd probably say something like, do you really expect something to happen to AWS or Microsoft? Look at the size.
It's not expected to, but it might.
No, but this too big to fail thing is not. It now doesn't look, you look at what happened to Lehman Brothers, you look at what happened to some of the big banks. It's not impossible that tech companies that were massive years ago are not the tech companies that are massive now. So it seems we can't possibly conceive of a world where AWS and Microsoft and Google have problems and they might disappear even. They might even run into financial issues that take them down. But it can happen. Those things can happen. They've happened to industry giants in the past.
Yeah.
So
What if suddenly they decide to
look at
invest
Nokia and phones.
all their money in some bullshit stock that went down the toilet? Yeah, and then back to my bugbear, which is just the power and the control. Let's say, for example, you're on this pod, and you said, yeah, if I'm honest, I think Jeff Bezos is a bit of a bellend. And then suddenly you're getting an inferior service from AWS, or you're getting cut off. I mean, I know Jeff Bezos is arm's length. I just picked him as a famous person. But let's say you said something that offended any of the hyperscalers.
Well, you'll know now when you try and watch Fallout Season 2 and you can't get it, Scott. You'll know.
And
what's happened,
he'll be like, yeah, we'll see about that, Scott. We'll see who the fucking bellend is now. But yeah, the point is exactly
Is that what
twirling
his
his.
arse like?
He'll grow a moustache just so he can twirl it.
I've
at
never
me.
heard Jeff Bezos speak. I've only ever read interviews with him. I've
I've seen interviews with him. I think he was on.
Lex Fridman.
Yeah, there we are. Lex Fridman. He came over really well. I mean, a lot of them do. I know to a certain degree they're good at how they present themselves publicly. But
Alex Friedman only ever seems to have Sam Altman on these days.
Sam Altman,
like-
who I always think it looks a bit creepy, if you ask me.
So does Lex Friedman.
Yeah, that's true. They're a good match. And they're all talking about AI and fucking
Yeah.
taking over the world. What was I going to say? Yeah, it's just that control. Yeah, I'm about to wrap up. You're still dealing with human beings at the end of the day. These companies are run by human beings, and human beings are not always rational. And so the more power you cede to that company, the more power you're ultimately ceding to the CEO of that company. And that slightly worries me. So just to sign off, Ian, I noticed in your comprehensive piece, you had a few subheads, and the final subhead was that Figo feeling. And so obviously that was a bit of a pun on feel good. Why? And you seem to be making reference to a famous Portuguese winger. How did that fit into your story?
'Cause when these young suppliers come along, or like someone changes something up and brings somebody in, it's almost like when you're on a football team and they go and get hold of a 20-year-old, and like you're the old player there, like wondering what's going to happen here.
Right.
But the Figo reference was Real Madrid bought David Beckham, I think, in 2003, and everybody's like, well, doesn't Luis Figo play on the right wing?
Right.
So they can't both play on the right wing. Obviously, one's going to have to go.
And he had the number 7.
Or one plays half time, the other
Yeah,
plays
who gets
other
the number?
half.
Yeah.
It's like a scaling back everyone's role. So it's like I said that Ericsson's probably got that feeling at the moment about AWS coming along.
I see.
Yeah,
So they're
that's the
David
analogy.
Beckham and Ericsson's Luis Figo.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. And then you finish by saying, yeah, Ericsson may have some of that Figo feeling. Cool. All right. Well, we'll wrap up there, partly because I'm getting some of those throat cutting and risk pointing gestures from Pierre.
I'm getting that bladder feeling.
And you're getting that feel, piss yourself feeling.
Song, I get that bladder feeling.
I got a feeling. Anyway, and so we'll wrap up there. Just to remind people that it's going to be a bit fragmented for the next couple of weeks. So I'm off in the Canaries. We'll see if we can do a remote one, where if we do, I'll obviously make sure to put palm trees in the background and that kind of smug bollocks. And then the week after that, we've got the half term, and you're going to be on holiday, aren't you, Pierre? So
No, I'll be working, but
you'll be working.
do a remote
Okay,
one as
all right.
well.
So we might be doing 2 remote ones. Is the point, over Teams or Zoom? Oh, we use Zoom, don't we?
Yeah.
Because we're fighting that Microsoft monopoly.
By using Zoom instead.
By using another massive company, American fucking company. So that's that. And yeah, and this one might not go up for a bit. But thanks a lot, Darren. Thanks a lot for coming on. That's good fun.
Thanks
for bringing the beers.
Thank you.
And you're welcome back. You don't have to be kidnapped, just to clarify.
No,
before you come
as I
back.
said, you make great salespeople, so
Yeah,
you know my number.
If you're going to use our shit in your collateral, I think some kind of license is justified. And good to see you again, Paul. And yeah, and thanks a lot for listening, and make sure you join us for the next one.